On paper, the U.S. economy is stable. Unemployment is 4.4%. Wages are rising, and headlines are reassuring. But with just 50,000 new jobs last month and nearly 1 million more people forced into part-time work against their will, the cracks are growing. Households feel the strain, trapped between promises and reality. Why does job security seem so fragile beneath the surface? The truth starts with the numbers, and it's not what you've been told. The official numbers paint a reassuring picture. In December 2025, the unemployment rate stood at 4.4%. That is a level most economists would call healthy, especially compared to the double-digit peaks seen after the 2008 crash or during the early pandemic years. Payrolls grew by 50,000 jobs that month, enough to keep the headline number steady, but far below the surges of the past few years. For all of 2025, preliminary figures suggest about 584,000 jobs were added, averaging just under 50,000 jobs per month. That is a sharp slowdown from the previous year, when job growth topped 2 million. On the surface, these statistics suggest stability. The unemployment rate is low by historical standards, and there is no sign of a sudden wave of layoffs. Major sectors like healthcare and professional services continue to hire, though at a more cautious pace. Employers have pulled back from the aggressive expansion of earlier years, and now focus on essential roles and careful replacements rather than broad hiring sprees. But steady unemployment and modest job gains only tell part of the story. These headline figures are designed to measure broad trends, not the day-to-day realities faced by millions. They can signal calm even as the ground quietly shifts beneath workers' feet, setting the stage for deeper cracks in the labor market. Beneath the steady unemployment rate, a different kind of strain is spreading. In December 2025, 5.3 million people were working part-time for economic reasons, almost a million more than the year before. These are workers who want full-time hours but cannot get them, often because their employer has cut back shifts or hiring has slowed. The numbers are highest in sectors like retail, hospitality, and healthcare, where unpredictable schedules and sudden hour cuts have become the norm. For someone like Erica, a composite retail worker, the impact is immediate. She used to work 36 hours a week at a national chain, but after the holiday season, her manager reduced her to 22 hours. The store is not letting anyone go, but it is not offering full-time hours either. Erica wants more work, applies for extra shifts, and even considers a second job, but with so many others in the same position, options are limited. Her paycheck shrinks, but her rent and grocery bills do not. She loses eligibility for employer health insurance, forcing her to skip doctor visits. The gap between what she needs and what she earns grows wider every month. For millions like Erica, being counted as employed on paper does not translate to security or stability. The stress of never knowing if next week's schedule will cover the basics makes every price increase feel sharper, every bill more urgent. Consumer prices kept climbing in 2025, even as the headline said inflation was cooling. The official Consumer Price Index rose 2.7% over the year through December. That means the average basket of goods and services cost nearly 3% more than it did a year earlier. Strip out the volatile categories like food and energy, and so-called core inflation landed at 2.6%. Both numbers are lower than the eye-watering spikes people saw in 2022 and 2023, but they still mean prices are rising faster than the Federal Reserve's long-term target. The real pressure comes from the categories that touch nearly every household. Shelter costs, everything from rent to the owner's equivalent for homeowners, rose 0.4% in December alone and were up 3.2% for the year. That's a big deal because shelter takes up more than a third of the typical household budget. Food prices climbed 3.1% over the year, and eating out got even pricier as the cost of food away from home jumped 4.1%. These aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They show up in higher rent checks, grocery bills that never seem to shrink, and restaurant tabs that leave people shaking their heads. Even as overall inflation cools, the essentials, housing and food, keep squeezing budgets month after month, making relief feel out of reach for many families. Average hourly earnings for private workers reached $37.02 in December 2025, up 3.8% from the year before. On paper, that is a healthy raise, better than the official inflation rate. But averages can be deceiving. Not every worker sees a 3.8% bump, and the reality behind those numbers is more complicated. Raises often arrive in small, uneven waves, and the cost of essentials can outpace the gains for many families. A single percentage point difference means little if your rent, groceries, and utilities have all jumped faster than your paycheck. At the checkout line, the gap between wage growth and daily costs becomes impossible to ignore. Take a family of 4 shopping for a week's worth of groceries. The cart holds less than it did last year, even though the bill is higher. Parents debate whether to buy fresh produce or settle for cheaper options. Kids ask for snacks that now feel like luxuries. The receipt stretches longer than the list, and the total leaves little room for anything extra. That weekly squeeze is not reflected in the average wage. It is felt in the small choices, the skipped items, and the constant mental math. For millions, a nominal raise offers hope, but the reality at the register tells a different story. The promise of higher earnings fades quickly when the basics keep getting further out of reach. Mortgage rates now hover just above 6%, a level that would have seemed unthinkable only a few years ago. The Federal Reserve's target rate, sitting in the 3.5 to 3.75% range, has filtered into every corner of household finance, but nowhere is the impact sharper than in housing. According to Freddie Mac's January 2026 survey, the average 30-year fixed mortgage rate stands at 6.09%. The result is a market where even modest price increases land like a punch. The FHFA House Price Index showed a 0.6% rise in November and a 1.9% jump over the past year. For a couple hoping to buy their first home, the math is unforgiving. In 2021, they were pre-approved at a 3% rate, imagining a monthly payment that fit their budget. Now that same home, with a 6% mortgage, means hundreds more each month, enough to push the dream out of reach. Even those who already own are often stuck, locked in by older, lower-rate mortgages. Moving for a new job, downsizing, or upgrading is not just a personal decision anymore, it is a financial hurdle. Inventory remains tight because so many would-be sellers cannot afford to trade up or even move sideways. The cost of shelter, once a stepping stone, has become a wall, holding back families and freezing mobility, even as official home price growth appears to slow. Household balance sheets are under growing strain. By the third quarter of 2025, total household debt climbed to $18.59 trillion, with credit card balances alone reaching $1.23 trillion. As interest rates remained high, the share of debt that was delinquent, that is past due or in collections, rose to 4.5%. The personal saving rate hovered at just 3.5% in November, leaving little room for unexpected costs. These numbers are not just abstract, they show up in daily decisions, in the quiet stress that shadows millions of families. Take a family like the Robinsons, living in a mid-sized city. Their income covers the basics, but barely. When their car needed repairs, they put it on a credit card, joining millions who use plastic to bridge the gap between paychecks and necessities. The balance grows each month, and the minimum payment rises. A medical bill arrives, and there is no emergency fund to cover it. Each swipe of the card is a calculation: groceries, prescriptions, school supplies. They skip a family outing, then a birthday dinner. The pressure builds, not all at once, but in a slow, grinding way that never lets up. By January 2026, that accumulated stress was reflected in the Conference Board's Consumer Confidence Index, which fell to 84.5, the lowest reading since 2014. Fewer people felt secure about their jobs or their financial future. The data tells the story. As debts rise and savings shrink, hope for a better year slips further out of reach. Today, nearly 1 in 4 Americans report skipping essentials to cover bills, despite healthy GDP headlines. When stability is this fragile, every policy and paycheck matters. The real test isn't growth, it's whether security reaches the kitchen table. That gap is the story we are still writing. Thanks for watching.